As of Laravel 5.5, we actually have the possibility of generating our own custom exceptions, and so that we'll have complete control over what happens when we throw this exception. Let's go ahead and use that to our advantage. First of all, I'm going to head over to my exceptions directory and I'm going to create a new custom exception. So right here, I'm going to simply say login failed exception.php, or rather I'll just change this to auth. Maybe we might want to use this exception also with our registration. So auth failed exception, and right here we simply need to create a class and extend the base exception, right? So we'll set a namespace to app exceptions, and now that we're here, something I would like to do is actually change our application name. So PHP artisan app name, and I'll change that to broadcast. Okay, so now that we've changed that, we no longer have app, but we have broadcast exceptions. Then we can now create a class called auth failed exception, which extends the exception class. And what we could do is actually pull in the exception for state that Laravel provides for us. Okay, so now for Laravel to be able to actually render our exceptions in the correct way, we'll need to provide two methods. One is a report method and the next is a render method, right? And this report method is going to be taking care of maybe reporting our errors or exceptions to services like custom logger when our app is in production or whenever we want. But in this case, what we just want to do is handle this exception in our application. So we're just going to say set up a public function render. We're not interested in reporting the application or reporting the exception. So this render method is simply going to return a response. So return response JSON, and would actually set the status code to 422. And here we need to pass in an array of data. So we're going to determine this array by seeing what data we can actually pass into this class and render as an error. Okay, so let's try to see what we have. Let's head over back to our authenticate user. And what Laravel does is actually uses the translation files to render that response. So if we just head over to our resources, lang directory, and head over to auth.php, this is the message that Laravel actually sends. These credentials do not match our records. We could actually use this by default. So let's just head over to our auth failed exception, and let's just say we set up a message key, and this is going to be equal to these credentials do not match our record, right? Because remember, this method is only going to be called in the case where either the user's password is not correct or the email is not correct, right? So we need to simply override this method and call our own custom exception. So back in our login controller, I'm going to paste this right here. And rather than throwing a validation exception, I'm going to throw a new auth failed exception. And for now, we don't have any parameters that we're passing into this method. Okay, so at the top, we need to pull that in. So use broadcast exceptions auth failed exception. Awesome. So let's try this out. If everything works perfectly, we should actually receive a JSON response with this message and a status code of 422. So let's try this. So we'll call our login model and I'll paste in that email, pass in a wrong password and see what we get. Sure enough, we have a 422 like before, but let's go to our network tab and actually see the data that we received. So we received a message property which says these credentials do not match our records. So it means our custom exception is actually being called, and since we can actually override all the methods in our authenticate users trait, this gives us a lot of flexibility to do whatever we want with our application. Okay, so we are successfully getting this message. What do we want to do when we receive that error? For now, we're just console.login, but we need to give a little feedback to our user, right? Let's take care of this in the next video.